Back in 2005, Michael Jackson was acquitted of child molestation charges, and this is why I don't believe that Michael Jackson was in fact a child molester. Now, most men, regardless of their sexual preferences, so whether they are heterosexual, whether they're attracted to, regardless of what type of physical type of woman they're attracted to, whether they're homosexual, whether they are child molesters, they tend to have sex with their preferred demographic if they have the opportunity, regardless of what their preferred demographic happens to be. Usually they don't have sex with just one person who belongs to their preferred demographic if they can, but they have sex with lots of different people in that demographic. They may sleep with multiple people from that demographic at the same time, or they may have a series of relationships with people from that demographic. So, for example, if you look at some of the high-profile cases or celebrities, you have people like Tiger Woods, who was caught sleeping with a lot of different women, a lot of different young women who probably kind of looked similar, had a similar look that obviously is the type of look that he's attracted to. He had a wife. He divorced his wife. He and his wife got divorced or separated or whatever. Then he moved on, and now he has a new girlfriend, or he got a new girlfriend who kind of looks like his old wife. So obviously Tiger Woods is attracted to a certain demographic, and those are the women that he keeps sleeping with all the time. Then you have a preacher, mega church preacher in Atlanta, Eddie Long, who was caught having sex with teenage males or young men, I guess young men in their maybe late teens, early 20s, around that age range. And there's a lot of victims came forward and talked about how Eddie Long, who is actually, he's married, has kids, maybe, I think, and these young men were talking about how Eddie Long had been spending money on them and trying to seduce them and all that type of stuff. So obviously Eddie Long has a track record of sleeping with teenage or young adult males. Then you have that football coach, the college football coach Jerry Sandusky, who was caught molesting a lot of young boys, I guess in their, maybe, I'm not sure how old they were, maybe prepubescent boys or early teens, something like that. So Jerry Sandusky, he had a long series of victims going back decades, and there were stories of his activities were surfacing. They had, I guess, some victims went to the authorities and they covered it up in the past, and some people at the school actually witnessed, or at least some assistant coach or something like that saw Sandusky in a shower with a boy, and he reported it. I guess they covered it up. But again, in the case of Jerry Sandusky, he was going after the same demographic for a long period of time. Over and over, there were lots of victims. And so that's the pattern that I'm talking about. Whether you have a heterosexual like Tiger Woods, you have a homosexual like Eddie Long, or you have a child molester like Jerry Sandusky, all three of them were constantly going after the same demographic over and over with multiple partners. So, and those are just three examples, but that's the general pattern that you see with all kinds of different men. Even historically, you look at kings and a lot of rich men who had these harems and mistresses and all that type of stuff. So that's the general pattern that you see with men's behavior. So now we come to Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was accused of molesting some young boys, or maybe pubescent boys. I think they were maybe 12 or 13 years old when he was accused of molesting them. And now, if he was going after that demographic, chances are, based on the behavior of most other men, the chances are that he wouldn't have just molested one or two of them. There would have been a large pattern of victims, just like Jerry Sandusky, just like a lot of these other ones. And so Michael Jackson has had access to that demographic for 12, 13-year-old boys for 30 or 40 years. He's been a successful entertainer. Actually, he was an entertainer since he was a young boy. So he has had access to the young pubescent boys for a long time, decades, 3 or 4 decades. So it means that, and the other thing is that boys in the 12, 13-year-old age range, pubescent boys, they really don't stay at that stage for a long period of time. So if Michael Jackson was going after that demographic, he would have to find new partners every few years, because his victims would start looking different. So because a 12, 13-year-old boy, like a pubescent boy, they may maybe look small when they're around at that age, but in 3-4 years they start growing, they'll start looking like adults. In a fairly short period of time, they'll start getting bigger. So if Michael Jackson liked them at that specific age, then there would have been a lot of victims, because he would have kept going to new boys every few years. So there would not have been only 2 victims. There wouldn't have been just one victim. There would have been lots of victims. 30, 40 years, there could have been a huge, I don't know how many, but a lot of victims. But there were only 2 alleged victims who came forward, and these victim stories did not seem to be very credible. So you had the first alleged victim of Michael Jackson, who basically took a cash payoff and then didn't take the case to trial, or didn't cooperate with the investigation, which seems a little strange. It seems like he and his family were just after money. Then you have a second victim who did take the case to trial, but the allegations that were made against Jackson by this particular alleged victim didn't seem to be very credible, because the evidence in the second case, the first case, obviously the evidence didn't come out in public, or the supposed evidence didn't come out in public, but the second case, the allegations did come out, because it actually went to trial. And in the trial, because the evidence was not very credible, the case, Michael Jackson was found not guilty. So my question would be, why is there a lack of victims coming forward? If Michael Jackson was a molester, there should be a lot more victims to come forward. And why are the only 2 victims, 2 alleged victims, why are their stories not very credible? The fact that there was a lack of victims coming forward for such a high-profile celebrity seems very strange, given the fact that with so many other celebrities, there have been many people who are only too happy to come forward to file lawsuits against them, to go to the police, to go to talk shows, to write books and do interviews, talking about their sexual relationships with these celebrities, talking about how they were molested or taken advantage of by celebrities. And there's just so many cases of of high profile celebrities who have, sometimes they have women who write tell-all books and talk about their sexual relationships. Sometimes they have if they engaged in molestation or anything like that, they have victims coming forward, people suing them. So if you look at Tiger Woods, that he had all kinds of women coming out of the woodwork to talk to the media and talk about how they slept with him. You had Jerry Sandusky, he had all these victims coming forward. Eddie Long, all kinds of young men coming forward. Ted Haggard, Bill Clinton, R. Kelly, he got sued by a lot of young women, took him to court and sued him for after having sexual relationships with him. You have all those priests, they had all kinds of victims coming forward. The WikiLeaks guy, he had victims coming or alleged victims coming forward accusing him of, I guess, having in Sweden. But with Michael Jackson, all the police, all the prosecutors could not find anyone to come forward. They couldn't find victims to come forward to testify against him. And Michael Jackson was one of the biggest celebrities in the world, and they couldn't find any victims. That doesn't make sense to me. So that's why I find the claims made against Michael Jackson to be dubious. For that reason alone, I would expect there to be a large number of victims coming forward. And if there were a lot of victims coming forward against Michael Jackson, then I would say, yeah, probably was guilty. He probably did do something. Because, I would say, yeah, maybe he was talented, but he did something wrong. But since the lack of victims undermines the credibility of the allegations against him.